Imagine, Episode 4 by Bernard King and Nicholas Lumarine. So Jemma has kidnapped Jerome. But Jerome has friends, very special and unusual friends, whom we are now all about to meet. He could not read other people's minds. He was not clairvoyant, and he could not even produce a good guess for her motives. All he could establish was that she wanted an unusual affair. That was his snippet. That was all he had for the moment. He picked up Blood Soaks the Valley for the fourth time and buried his head between the pages. But there was too much blood soaking the valley, waning his interest, this time at the turn of the 10th page. He watched the novel slide down the sheet and thump to the floor again. Apart from police procedural novels and information books, Jerome's literature boxes were blank. Escapist books did not figure on his shelf. With his present life, he considered he had little to escape from. But perhaps not. From the other angle, he had plenty to escape from. A small box on the windowsill brought his frown, first of surprise, and then bent with annoyance. That was Jemma's fault. He had been staring out of the window into the garden, thinking about her before he went to work that morning. Forgetfulness was not one of his faults. The lady was pressing more of his buttons than he realized. Picking up the box, he went through his security routine. The first key he took out of the box. The second, the larger, was secreted behind the false skirting in the sitting room, and the passpad for the electronic lock he slipped out of his wallet. Jemma Lumarine had dropped to the bottom of his thinking before he reached the armour-plated door of his spare bedroom. The well-oiled padlocks slipped easily out of their clasps at the touch of the key. With a surge of pleasure, Jerome pushed open the door and smiled at his friends. On cue, to disturb his pleasure, downstairs the telephone rang. It was probably his mother or his sister or... His third thought pulled the door closed and caused his rush down the stairs to fumble up the receiver. "Jerome, my darling, could you get to the hotel before me and put on what will be on the bed?" He could ask what she was all about. What was her interest in him? All the questions that had been bruising his brain. But stupidly, he found himself nodding. "If you wish." It was not quite a stutter, but almost. "When you are dressed," she paused, "I will be able to undress you." Her voice had trembled to a whisper. Her excitement was contagious. Jerome found himself trembling. His mouth moved, but no words could struggle out. What did he say to a long-distance turn-on? It did not matter. The phone was wailing loneliness again. Why had he not asked his question? If he was honest, he knew the reason. The tentacles of anticipation were already curling about him. Mistress Jemma was beckoning and twirling him in. Answers could spoil everything. Anticipation worked both ways, in preempting both pleasure and disappointment. With either answer, anticipation finished, and he did not want that. Thoughtfully, he returned to his spare room. Placing the box on top of the green and black steel cabinet, he relocked the back bedroom and secreted the keys. The answers could wait until tomorrow. The receptionist's tired face matched the tired atmosphere of the hotel lobby. Her holiday photographs had been replaced by a DVD, which she had the decency to pause as she passed him the note. It was timed 10 minutes ago. Jemma would return to the bedroom in 20 minutes. He was surprised. He had expected a parade uniform, but, laid out on the bed, as if for a kit inspection, were battle fatigues. Soft desert boots a webbing belt, the black and green smudge of camouflage, and the light material were not at all a regular issue, and it did not match. But she could not know that. The use of this uniform would not be at all as the army had intended. It fitted almost perfectly, even the smell. The mix of dye, the material, the webbing cream, and the leather induced whiffs of memories that whirled him back to his training depot eons ago. He was naked under the fatigues as if he was following battle orders, orders that made it easier for the medics to get at him if he were wounded. But this time he was in a bedroom where there was no waiting for hell to start. Poised tensely between the twin peaks of dread and duty, with one eye on the enemy line and the other on his men, watching for the break of the mentally feeble or the fear-stricken shackled to the ground with terror as the rest moved forward. Now he was not giving orders. The deal was for him to take them. But there was one thing he would not be taking. Out of his wallet, he smoothed the £50 note she had left in the bathroom last week. He was not her toy boy, or today, her toy soldier. And to underline his annoyance, he pressed her £50 note onto her side of the bed. "Attention!" Her order, shouted the second she entered the bedroom, snapped him standing. The feeling of stupidity and his embarrassed grin vanished. The intensity of her glare pushed the familiar and normal over the cliff of reason. "Eyes front!" He had moved his head towards her, watching as she placed a holdall on the bed. Another lesson in thoroughness from Jemma Lumarine. Her orders, snapped out firmly and loudly, had the bark of a military command, with the emphasis on the last syllable. This lady was not superficial. She researched and rehearsed. Her eyes ignored his as he was inspected, slowly, minutely, from boots to berry. Without expression, she moved towards him, slowly lifting, then placing her curling fingers to release the top button of his fatigues. "About turn!" Her expertise impressed again. There was no fumbling with the webbing belt, a press from each index finger in exactly the right place, and the buckle fell apart. The belt dropped to the floor as her hand moved to the button securing his pants. She dropped to her knees in front of him. He dared a glance down. She was staring intently, her attention focused on his zip. They both watched her finger pick the tag, then a gentle pressure downward started his generator again. The surreal, stupid, mad, his search for words to fit this bizarre scene suddenly crashed. "No!" Her jump up and back, one sudden movement broke his excitement. Her eyes were alive, trembling hands took his face between her palms. "Next week, Jerome." She pulled his face towards her. "I shall undress you next week." A kiss, hard and rough, crushed onto his mouth. The beats were two in the following silence, although neither of them counted. Jerome was shaking. Whether with desire, fury, excitement, did not matter. Jemma felt it and broke the kiss. It had been a tease too far. He was about to grab. Her step back was cancelled. "No." Her lips this time were gentle, moving from his to a cheek, then to the side of his neck. Her hand brushed down his tension, caressing the back of his head. His hands gripped her arms, holding tight as the imaginings of the past week died. The weight will make it much more wonderful. He believed her. He really believed her. Her now anxious eyes were asking, not ordering, him to go with her. This was not fair. This was Premier Division wind-up. She knew he could crush her beneath him on the bed, do what he wanted, leave her bleeding, bruised and wretched. She did not move back, but held him close, pressing him nearer with a finger in the small of his back. Their bodies moulded. Close no longer worked. They were one. The silence was 4 beats. Jerome did not want to count. He did not want to move, ever. His switch startled his imagination. Suddenly he was her, pushing, daring, and terrifying herself with what she was doing, teasing a stranger to the point of rape. So that's how the rich did it. When money no longer worked, emotion and danger were two of their dwindling kicks. I love you, Jerome. I want everything perfect. His cartwheels around the room, his heart singing like a 1,000-voice choir, and his drop to his knees, wringing his hands with joy, never happened. This time, he did not believe her. But I suppose you don't believe me. Hell, this woman could read his mind. But did it matter? Mentally, he was lost, a passenger on Jemma's bus of insanity, and she was driving. She moved back. Placing her hands on his shoulders, she held him at arm's length, the distance between them scorched by the intensity of her stare, the stare that looked not at, but into him. Did you feel it? Again he was pulled against her, her hands on his buttocks, pressing him closer. Up, down, up, down. He was not on a bus, but a roller coaster bouncing with emotion. The stare broke. Her blink jumped him into focus. Immediately, her hands moved to his chest, pressing him gently away. The gap between them was enough, just, to bring pause to the fervour. Wonderful! Her breasts were heaving with excitement. So wonderful that you are with me. Now the switchback was diving, spilling him down in a tumble along with his passion. She moved slowly back, still drinking in his uniform. Jerome waited for the next twist in the emotional torture. But this time it was pleasure, physical pleasure. Her earlier visit to the bedroom had been not only to lay out his uniform, but also to install her usual bottle in the drinks fridge. As they sipped the champagne, Jemma slipped a ring folder out of the hold-all. My husband is a writer. He has just started a new book. Jerome had wondered what they were going to talk about now the obvious had been cancelled. Should he tell her he knew who she was, or should he keep cool? His dither was interrupted. You might be interested. She passed him the folder, then lay beside him on the bed, brushing the £50 note aside. So, she was married. She had not offered him a guilt-heavy confession. Just take it or leave it, or throw it away. It's not his usual style. She turned, her head propped up by the crooked elbow, and watched as he read. No, it was not Nicholas Lumarine's usual style. The blood and thunder had been dropped. The book was the start of a love story that rose from the pages, not so much tender, but compelling and puzzling. The A4 pages, there were 10, with the double-line spacing in 12-point times New Roman font, were, like the beginning of most novels, mainly scene-setting. Jerome's read quickened, absorbing the stream of sentences faster and faster as the plot suddenly had trademarks. A man sat in a cafe across the road from a dingy hotel, nervous but excited as he waited for the arrival of his possible mistress. It was to be their second meeting. Their first, an unfinished account in the middle of page 5, had been of the blatant pick-up by the woman on the train. The writing was punchy and unedited, as if the words had been slammed on the page with annoyance. He lowered the manuscript, allowing a puzzled glance in her direction. So, her raised eyebrows completed her question. But you've told him about us. Her laugh was a scoff that died quickly in an undertone of fear. The worldly wife had faded. Edges of fear crept into her eyes. If Nicholas, that is my husband, had even a whiff of suspicion about us, he would beat me. Surprised shock triggered his blink. To him, violence and literary success seemed opposites. My husband is a very cruel man. To Jerome, the answer was simple. So why do you stay with him? We have a child. Quickly, the twisted cords of mother love, wife hate, manipulation, and childhood damage revealed the effective rope with which Jemma was bound to her marriage. Jerome had no children. They were one of the delights planned when he had finished in Iraq, joys that would now never arrive. Again, the beta blocker of self-discipline slammed shut on the beckoning self-pity, aided by Jerome's slow movement. The sleeve of her blouse lifted easily from the unbuttoned cuff. A red wheel of violence flamed from under the delicate material. Hot oil. Gently, she traced her finger over the wound. He didn't like his dinner. She lifted the sleeve higher, exposing the length of the wound. So, he threw it at me. It did not fit. The smiling, happy guy on his book cover did not advertise domestic brutality. Didn't you call the police? She laughed a ripple of scorn and sarcasm. He's too quick, too subtle. He started crying, then rushed me to hospital. Gently, Jerome traced his finger around the contusion, then stopped. His gesture and questions had been laced with concern. Slowly, he withdrew his hand. He was crossing fences, private fences. Her personal life was not his business. Usually, he does not leave marks. She pulled down her sleeve and slowly buttoned her cuff. Jerome tried to reconcile the frightened creature beside him to the woman barking orders from the doorway 10 minutes earlier. His wives were standing on each other's shoulders. It was time they were toppled. I should not have told you that. She straightened. Discipline and purpose took hold. Her hand stretched out and her fingers quickly flipped open the front of his battle dress. Why did you? Her kissing across his bare chest, her scent of nearness, and her golden traces falling across his arms could not have stopped his question, but her raised forefinger, pressing gently to his lips, smothered any further words. Shh, enjoy. 3 times her lips traced across his body, then stopped, her cheek resting against his skin. Slowly, gently, his hands cupped, gently easing her head back and up. He had moved forward to kiss, but tantalizingly, she pressed away. Gently shaking her head, she unclasped his hands and slowly slipped back. Her eyes never left his face, her expression intense and excited as she wriggled away. Deftly, she picked up her holdall, quietly opened the door, and with a smile, vanished. Christ! The torrent of excitement draining out of his body took his strength with it. The bed sagged violently. His back bounced twice, so heavy was his landing. The total exhale of breath took the tension from his shoulders. His legs fell apart and his arms dropped sideways, one supporting his dangling hand over the edge of the bed. He had been on an emotional roller coaster from peaks of excitement to troughs of bewilderment. He had never met a woman like Jemma, a number 1 turn-on, a number 1 tease, and yet she wasn't. Weird though the experience had been, he had enjoyed it. She had enjoyed it, and that was what the meeting had been all about. But his spread-eagle relaxation was just a pause. Mrs. Lumarine had not finished. The muffled ring was coming from his clothes in the wardrobe. He got up to it at the 6th ring, the one before it went answer phone. Thank you, she whispered. I'm looking forward to next Wednesday. Please bring the uniform. He did not have time to reply. It was another Jemma short-style call. The second £50 note was folded in half and again placed upright on the bathroom shelf. The emotions and thoughts that had leapt in and out of his head since she had left him flattened on the bed were now topped by a renewed annoyance. Obviously, she intended to pay him £50 a visit. But as he folded the note with the first, the truth poked its head above the surface. To Jemma, this was a transaction. She wanted turn-on, weird, different, unusual, whatever, and was prepared to pay. His refusal to stuff the notes into his pocket and accept his part of the deal was not simply his pride revolting. Her blonde hair falling across his arms, her weight pressing him down, her kisses, her telephone calls, her weirdness, and his constant thoughts about her were opening doors he never knew existed, and all the doors led deep, deep into his sense-marked love. He was falling in love with Jemma. The thoughts exploded movement. He jumped off the bed and paced around the tiny room. How long for, he did not know, until a banging on the floor explained the irritation of the occupants below. Whether it was supposed to happen, whether he wanted it, whether the timing was right, was puerile thinking. What should concern him was what could he do about it? The answer was simple and immediate. Not much. He would pull up his drawbridge, slam down his portcullis, and scamper behind his thick walls of suspicion, as he usually had when a woman wanted to enter his castle. But he knew it was too late. She was already smiling from his courtyard, deep behind his defences. Jemma now crowned his thoughts. The rest of his life was an automatic. But, aware he was a hired help, hung on the back of the wardrobe door, unhooked, used, and replaced, then the door slammed shut for another week, was an inevitable, sobering thought. Nicholas Lumarine's 10 pages, creased now where he had sat on them, slipped to the floor as he stood, annoyed and frustrated. He was not in her league, and never would be. And now the new story, the pages tight with description and information that almost carbon copied his excitement the previous Wednesday, was another hang-up. Physical facts were missing. The book he had been reading, his cup of coffee was tea, and his annoyance with the receptionist who could not be bothered to look at him, a little incident most writers would have latched onto, were missing. Of course they would be. The scene was pretty mundane, an easy opening, hooking the reader with anticipation. Gemma's favourite subject. She had shown him the pages, smiling at the coincidence of their meeting framed in the new-style novel. For a long time he laid on the bed, thinking about coincidences. He would not be in this hotel bedroom if he had caught a number 31 bus instead of a 65 3 Wednesdays ago. If he had turned right out of his office instead of left. If he had not stopped to buy his magazine on the way home. Fate had dictated he would be there. He felt like a ship that had left harbour without knowing where it was going. Either he floated away into the unknown or paddled back to safety. Jemma was new, excitement and pleasure. His old life had already faded. The tide had turned. The harbour was closed. He could not go back. And why go home? Jemma would have paid for the room. He need not leave. He could stay there for the night and dream on the dying traces of her perfume. Thoughtfully, he undressed, folding the uniform into the bag Jemma had left for it. A little of Gemma's weird behaviour was dropping out. Her directness was necessary. Being the wife of an internationally best-selling author didn't exactly conjure up the happy housewife in a cosy cottage in Berkeley Square, making jam and polishing the copper kettle. Her husband's career would have sucked her into the social circus. Charity managing, duty dinners, first nights, networking weekends, and interminable meetings. That left her little time for the ordinary. Again, the two words that had circled him for the past 3 weeks came into land. Why him? There was only one solution to that question. The next time they met, he would ask her. His 5 years of doubt and indecision had not been wasted years. Now he was a master of procrastination. Immediately his drawbridge groaned up. This time, not to keep anyone out, but to keep him in. He might not like her answer. It might wreck everything, and he could not take another put down. Why him was suddenly becoming a dangerous question. He would have to think carefully before asking it. Imagine, until the next episode of Imagine in a Fortnight. He would pull up his drawbridge, slam down his portcullis, and scamper behind his thick walls of suspicion as he usually had when a woman wanted to enter his castle. But he knew it was too late. She was already smiling from his courtyard, deep behind his defences.